Greetings, clarinophiles and clarinophilettes. I'd just like to do a little word of preface before I actually begin this video, this tutorial on improving the tuning of your clarinet. As you'll see, most of the tuning issues that I'm going to be correcting one way or another are going to be the subtraction or addition of cork thicknesses, the addition of different materials, say paper or adhesive back foam or different things like that, that will correct, say, issues of extreme sharpness or issues of flatness or whatever. That's in most of those cases. And in most of those cases, that will actually suffice. But every once in a while, you have to bend a key. And so I'm going to show you the basic principle on how to do that, but I'll have to say be careful when you're doing it. You can actually bend a key slightly, a little bit at a time, until you get it just the way you want it. So less is more in that case. Just try a little and then test, and then try a little and then test. And you should know this, that clarinet keys are especially made so that they can be bent and yet remain rigid. It's kind of splitting the difference between two extremes, between being like very bendable, so much so that the clarinet won't stay in adjustment, or extremely rigid so that you can't change it at all. And you say, well, why would they not want to make it extremely rigid so you can't change it? And the reason is because of us. Because clarinet players play with different strength reeds, they play with different discernments of balance, they play with different tone production techniques, and where one clarinet player will produce a beautiful note in tune and nice and clear and ringing and all that, the same clarinet player or a different clarinet player will put their setup on and play with their reed strength and all that stuff, and all of a sudden that note is fuzzy and buzzy and got all kinds of garbage in it. And that would require, in many cases, increased pad height because there's so much noise coming off the vibrations of the pad in the way they play, because of the way they play. So the clarinet is an instrument, unlike the oboe, say, which is more like a real machine where everything has to work just, in perfect adjustment. You got all these interdependent issues and all these adjustment screws. The clarinet, very different. We want to make the clarinet play as well in tune and with as much clarity and flexibility and resonance as possible in relationship to the player that is playing the clarinet. So anyway, what I will show you is the basic principle on bending a key, and that is, as I said, do it a little bit at a time, incrementally, and also always use some kind of device. In the video, actually, I think I used this little metal rod right here to slide under the cup arm and lift the pad off the tone hole. So when I leverage the key on the other side to open it up and increase the travel, then what happens is that leverage doesn't crush the pad on the tone hole, because the pad is being pulled off that tone hole and all the weight is falling on the metal rod. So keys are bendable. You can do it. You might want to take a junker clarinet and do a little practice on it so that you can adjust the keys of your clarinet by bending. But the preference is always to try to make those pad height adjustments, whether they be more or less, to try to make them by means other than key bending. But it's not completely anathema. It's something in some cases that's absolutely necessary. So, having said that, let's proceed and learn about how we can all improve the tuning on our clarinet by some perceptive testing, and a few simple means. Greetings, clarophiles and clarophilettes. It's been a while since we've done a video, and so I decided to sort of get into the videos that I have planned. I have several of them planned, but try to get into them as much as possible with a tutorial that's going to help you do a lot of things on your clarinet that will help improve the tuning. Now, I know a lot of people are very wary of the clarinet, and probably for good reason in terms of doing things that can't be reversed. But everything I'm going to talk about today can easily be reversed, so if you get in trouble, it's generally no problem to fix things. And in cases where that's not exactly the case, or not so easily the case, I'll definitely warn you about that. But you can dramatically improve the tuning of your clarinet with a few simple things, and it's not rocket science. Geez, if it was rocket science, no clarinet player I know could do anything, could possibly do it, because, you know, we're in the arts, folks. I mean, clarinet players are just uniformly outrageously bad in math and all those things that rocket science requires. But we can do a few things, and you can do them too. It's no problem. So let's get started and talk about, first of all, what kind of tools are we likely going to need? Most of the tools you're going to need are common tools that are easily available, and a lot of them you have laying around your house already. You don't need specialized tools or anything like that. Let me give you a good example. Most of you probably have some kind of drill set. There is a drill that is a really great tool for doing some of the tuning stuff that I'm talking about. Here's another one, just a small little drill. Very, very, very useful. And let's take a look. I've got a list here so I don't forget any. First, you're going to need some contact cement. Contact cement is a very good substance. You can get it at any Home Depot or most any place. Just don't sniff it too much because it's not good for you. You're going to need some cardstock or some cork. You can get cork of various thicknesses. Sometimes you can find adhesive back cork and adhesive back foam. Those things are very helpful, of different thicknesses. And the cardstock, you should look around and see if you can find some, paper products in your house of different thicknesses of stock, because those things are very valuable in adjusting, tuning, and getting things really well to work really well on your clarinet that won't change. For instance, the reason a lot of flute repairmen, artist flute repairmen, use paper to adjust the tolerances and the coordination of pads and all that stuff is because paper does not compress like cork does. It doesn't compress like foam does and other things like that. So once you get the right thickness and it's all set, it's going to stay that way for a long, long, long time. And it'll be the same with you when you decide to use paper to make some adjustments of pad heights and all that stuff. Let's see, what else? You're going to need leather punch. Leather punch is really cool, and it's very valuable. You don't need to, like if a cork is long on a key, you don't need something extra long to match that cork on the key. All you need is a small amount that will adjust the pad height as needed. And some industrial razor blades will help. A pair of scissors. And most of you have a kitchen knife there in your drawer where your spoons and forks and all the other stuff is. Kitchen knife's a very, very valuable tool. And again, like I said, these screws like this with smooth ends. So, and there are a few other things, but we'll go through that. I think I've got basically the whole list there. So let's go on and talk about how to lower the pitches on clarinets, on particular pitches that are offensively sharp. Well, let's start with a few examples here. For instance, like the open G is often offensively sharp. And some of that is mitigated if you play the open G with 3 fingers down in the right hand. That will help drop the pitch, and sometimes that's a very helpful thing to do and a good habit to get into, especially because it helps you play over the middle break much more smoothly. But usually that open G is pretty doggone sharp. Now, if it's sharp in relationship to the rest of the clarinet, you're going to need to lower the pad height that is under the A key. And the way you do that is very simple. You can take a little piece of thin foam back cork or that adhesive foam back. You can put it underneath the thumb key or between the thumb key lever and the lever for that pad that goes under the A key. And that, either way, that will lower the pad height under the A key, and that will help lower the open G. Try that and then test. And if that lowers the G and gets it in a range where you can play it tolerably well in tune, then your job is done. And it's very simple. Just punch out that little circle of thin adhesive foam, put it under the thumb key, and you've adjusted that pad height. To raise the G, you can thin the cork between the thumb lever and the key lever, or you can thin the cork beneath the thumb lever. You can also do the same thing. I'll give you an example. Under this key right here, if this key opens too much, then it's very simple to I would put the little disc of foam underneath and attach it to the body, not to the cork on the key, but on the body itself. And that will lower this pad height if this note is sharp, and then it'll be easier to play in tune. And by the way, we're not looking for absolute perfection in tuning. What we're looking is for pitches to be adjustably played in tune with, a reasonable amount of adjustment. Your tongue position, embouchure, and all those things. And your own hearing really determines on how well you're playing in tune, not exactly the clarinet per se. It's not a typewriter. It's a clarinet, and the adjustments we make behind our nose can really improve or mess up our tuning. Another pad height adjustment, sometimes you find very sharp notes, is the throat A, the A and the A flat. Again, you can punch out a little bit of little disc of the adhesive back foam and attach it to the body right underneath the A key itself. So it's sitting right down there, and it's going to prevent the key from opening too much. And that's the principle, by the way. If your note's sharp and the key opens a lot, then you can close it down. You can close it down by adding something to the body, or you could add something to the cork, but it's very easy to add it to the body. And then that adjusts the pad height down, and that's going to lower your pitch. If the throat A is flat, you can increase the opening of the A key, raising the pitch by simply thinning the cork under the A key lever. Now, a question you might ask about that is, well, if I can lower the pitch, then how far can I lower it down? And the answer is, let me put this clarinet up. The answer is it depends. What does it depend on? It depends on how well your reeds are balanced. It depends on how your tone production techniques are. For instance, if you play unbalanced reeds, or if you bite and have a lot of inflexibility, let's say, in your tone production, when you lower the pad to get the tuning better, if you're playing unbalanced reeds, then they're going to tend to be breathy and give you that in the sound. And the lower you make the pad height, then the more the more of that resistance you're going to hear in the form of breathiness or air in the sound. Also, there's the aspect of flexibility in the tone. The lower the pad height goes, the lower the pitch, but also the less flexibility there is in terms of the sound, in terms of how you can move the shape of the sound and in terms of how you can move the pitch. It gets more and more locked in as you get the pad lower. And you have to decide yourself when you're testing whether all that's acceptable or not. You can know, for instance, that you have gone too far. For instance, if I adjusted that open G and I played the open G and I heard a lot of fuzzy sounds, then I would know that I'd gone a little bit too far with my adjustment. And if that happens and you're still sharp, then there's another way to fix it. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Another problematic note on the clarinet is the C sharp, G sharp here. This is a big problem because it's often, this key is often set too low, and therefore you get a flat sound. So you're going to have to open that up rather than close it down. But sometimes, if the note is sharp, again, you're going to have to open the key up so to increase the pad height as opposed to decreasing the pad height. And so the way you want to do that is you want to support the pad side of the key so that I put a metal rod in there. I think you'll be able to see that in the photograph. And that lifts the pad off the tone hole. And then on the other side, then I can slide something common like a kitchen knife, and I can lift gently on this spatula right here. And that will increase, this will raise this and increase the amount of travel when I close this key. And when that travel increases, then the opening of the tone hole, the opening of the pad increases, and therefore, voila, the pitch goes up. And also, I get a lot more clarity. A lot of times, people are upset by this note because they think it's fuzzy and all that. And if you test the note and it's kind of fuzzy, check the tuning. If it's flat, then you can very easily simply raise this spatula, which will increase the pad height, and that's going to get the note better in tune. So that's a real cool way to do it. Or there's another way to do it. If your cork underneath the C sharp, G sharp spatula right here, if the cork is very thick underneath the key, then you can use your abrasives, your 320 and your 400 abrasives, to thin that cork. And when you thin the cork underneath the lever, you're going to increase the pad height opening and also improve the clarity, the flexibility, and the tuning. So it'll get the note that was once flat will get better and better in tune. So those are some things you can do, and you can do them yourself. In fact, it's probably better that you do them yourself because you're the guy that's got to play it. And if the note is sharp for you or if the note is flat for you, then you need to adjust it so it will work with the way you play. And of course, it goes without saying that again, the clarinet's not a typewriter. It's what you do behind your nose that's going to really determine a lot of the flexibility that you need in order to play well in tune. So adjusting the tuning, again, is not something you're looking for absolute perfection. What you're looking for is adjusting the note so that it is reasonably easy to play well in tune. I have my clarinet set up so that I can play from, say, low G right up to high D above the staff, and even more high D, E, and F sharp, and basically set the needle right on 0 all the way up. And it's not because my clarinet's perfectly in tune. It's because it's really well in tune. and every note is easily adjusted. What I mean by easily adjusted? Easily adjusted means to me that I can play in tune, that is, I can get the tuning right without distorting the shape of the sound, without distorting the color of the sound. Because pitch, color, and shape they all move together. So if I have to move a great deal to bring the pitch down, it's going to distort the shape and color of the sound. And you don't want that. Generally speaking, you want this pitch, color, and shape to be as even and uniform as possible throughout the clarinet. And there is no perfection in this, but you can get pretty darn close with a well-designed clarinet. Okay, so those are the reasonable expectations, and that's what you should be looking for. It should be reasonably easy to make any adjustments behind your nose and play well in tune. Okay, so now what about sharpness otherwise? Let's say that the color and shape are fine, but the note's very, very sharp. So what do you do? How do you fix that? I'm going to talk about that next. One of the really cool things that recent technology has afforded us is this wonderful little stuff called poster putty. Now, poster putty is wonderful because you can use it and shape it and form it into almost anything you want, and it'll stay where it's put. You can build it up if you want to, but so you can adjust it so you can get things very, very finely in tune in tone holes using the poster putty. And it'll stay that way like forever until you decide to go in and remove it. And when you want to remove it, it's easily removed because it never hardens. That's really one of the wonderful things about it. So get yourself some poster putty if you've got sharp, offendingly sharp notes, and you can tune those notes down very easily. And when you shape them properly, then they're going to retain their color and flexibility and freedom even as you add the material. Now, one of the problems with past things, and clarinet players years ago, they didn't have really good materials like poster putty available to them, so they would do stuff like, like put electrical tape in the tone hole. And the problem with electrical tape and other substances like that is they have sharp edges, and the sharp edges create distortion and create resistance. And that is not a good thing. What you want to do is you want to lower the pitch of a given note without changing the color and shape. Remember, those things are always a consideration: pitch, color, and shape. And you want to make the least amount of sacrifice in color and shape as possible while getting the pitch that you want. So how do you do this? Let's say we have an offending note that's very, very sharp. It's an open tone hole, and we can't quite adjust it with pad heights like we would like to. So what we do is we take a little bitty piece of the poster putty and we roll it into a ball. And you can stick it on the end of a pen or something and place it on the mouthpiece side of the tone hole, because you want to lower the pitch. So it's going to be on the mouthpiece side of the tone hole. And then comes the use of your magical little screw end or whatever you have that is small, relatively small, and has a nice smooth shape. You can use you can dip it in water so it doesn't stick to the poster putty, or you can use saliva. I use saliva. It's not very sanitary, but it's my clarinet. I mean, what am I going to worry about? Anyway, you can use saliva, and you can roll. You can use this tool to roll out and spread out the poster putty onto the mouthpiece side of the tone hole. Take a small amount and do that, and then test the note again. If it's still too sharp, then increase the amount, and you can just build the poster putty up, put another little ball, maybe a little smaller, and spread it out down there, and then test that. And just continue to do that until the note's just the way you want it, okay? The only thing you have to worry about is to check down the tone hole, down the bore of the clarinet, to make sure that none of the poster putty is protruding into the bore below the surface of the tone hole. Because for one thing, as soon as you run, if you run a swab through it, it's going to pull all that out anyway. So make sure the poster putty doesn't protrude into the bore, and you can move the stuff around and shape the stuff around any way you want. You can see the photo examples there. Should be fairly clear to you. Now, I've used blue poster putty there. Now, I have black poster putty. It's not poster putty, but it's black putty. So it blends very well with the clarinet. It's not unsightly like this bright blue poster putty is. But you can check. I haven't seen like a standard commercial poster putty that's actually black. But there's the blue, obviously. You can see that. That's a color you could see from some planet outside our solar system. And but then there's white, and I think there's gray. I've seen. But look around. You go to Walmart or go to Office Max or someplace like that. You can find the poster putty. And believe me, one little patch of poster putty is going to last you a lifetime. And, unless you're tuning clarinets for 5,000 clarinet players, don't do that. Teach them, ask them to watch this video, and then they can do it themselves, okay? Save yourself a slave labor. Anyway, those are some ways that you can adjust the tuning the notes down. Now, there's the question of tuning them up. Say, for instance, when you can't raise any pad heights, which would raise the pitch, how do you do that? You send it to me. That's what you do. Because, I'll show you. In order to tune those notes that are really flat, but you can't, there's no pad height adjustment for them. For instance, like if you have a flat high C or other pitches, you're going to need stuff like this. You're going to need different reamers, hand reamers, and those are, because of poster putty, those are not really permanent adjustments, but you're going to need to expand and enlarge the tone hole, or you're going to need to expand the undercutting to adjust the first mode, that is the low register notes, and the middle register notes. And for that, you're going to need something like undercutting tools. And I'll show you one of those. There you go. There's an undercutting tool. I don't think the way I got my camera set up, you're not going to be able to look at it real close. I'll try to blow this up. Quality's not going to be great. But that's an undercutter, and what you do is you run the undercutter into the bore, and you put it under the offending tone hole, and then you run the arbor through the tone hole, and then you undercut the tone hole so that the tone hole comes down straight, and then it bevels out, or it comes in this shape or that shape, and that's going to improve the tuning ratios. It's going to improve the flexibility of the tone, and it's going to raise it somewhat, but it's going to raise the low register more than the second register in most cases, but not in every case. So it takes a lot of experience, trial and error, but I've gotten pretty doggone skilled at fine-tuning the 12ths on the clarinet. So if you have these problems, I don't care if you have one of my clarinets or not, if you have these problems and you need them fixed, you need the ratios fixed if they can possibly be fixed, give me a call and I'll be happy to try to improve the tuning of your clarinet. Or you could just buy one of my clarinets, because that's pretty much already been done. Okay, so those are some of the ways that you can, correct tuning for your own clarinet. And if you don't feel like that you're really solid in terms of your tone production and all that, you might, consult your teacher, and your teacher would help you make improvements on your clarinet in terms of tuning and all that stuff. And if they're not familiar, if your teacher's not familiar, then ask him or her to watch this video, and maybe it will help them help not just you, but all the other students. In any case, there's the question of when can't I really fix the tuning? And that is a very interesting question that takes a little historical insight to understand between, and the effects, that is, the effects between large bore and small bore clarinets. But I'll say this, that when you're tuning, primarily what you're going to be tuning is the low register notes in relationship to the second register notes, or the twelfths. So you want to always test your twelfths. For instance, you can play a low A, say at a nice mezzo forte, then hit your register key, and then the E, of course, on the fourth space will appear. So the question is how well is that working? How good? What is the ratio? The ratio between the low A and the E. Well, by ratio I mean, are both of them in tune? Or does one go, maybe both of them are sharp, but one's like 10 cents sharp and the other's only 5 cents sharp? Well, you can't really perfect that tuning, can you? That tuning ratio, so both of those can be perfectly in tune. But if you lower the one that's 5 cents sharp to get it perfect, then you will also improve the one that's 10 cents sharp, so it'll only be 5 cents sharp. That's pretty cool. Or if a note is flat, and I take one of these medieval instruments here and correct that, if the second note is also flat, then it will improve too. One note's 10 cents flat, the other's 5 cents flat. I can perfect the 5 cents flat one so it plays beautifully in tune, and improve the one that's 10 cents flat, and that brings it in pretty much to playability. Plus there are other things to help perfect the tuning besides that. That's just really beyond the scope of this video to talk about. So you can, improve one note and perfect another if the ratios are moving in the same direction. If both the low register and the middle register is flat, or if the low register and the middle register, if they're both sharp, then you can perfect one and improve the other, or you can at least improve all of them. Big problem, though, is when one note is very sharp. Say, for instance, the low A is very sharp in relationship to the E. So you play low A, it's 10 cents sharp. Then you hit your register key, and what do you get? You get an in-tune E. You can't fix that A. If you try to fix the A and bring it down so that it's not sharp, the low A, then you're going to make the E flat. So, and you don't want your clarion E to be flat. Better to tolerate the sharp low A and try to fix that some other way than to try to get that low A in tune. One of the things, if you hit a problem like that, where one note's flat and the other note's sharp, or one note's in tune and the other note's flat or sharp, if they're moving in other words, if their tuning ratios are moving in opposite directions, either narrow or wide, then I think the only choice that you should get a clarinet that plays with good tuning ratios. That would be the real answer. And or I could say, parenthetically, you just get one of my clarinets, because the tuning ratios on our clarinets are fantastic. I make sure that they are before we send them out. But in any case, the one thing that's incumbent on you is to try to get your clarion register, that is the C, third space C up to high C, to try to get those notes as in tune as possible. And your throat tones need to be in tune, well in tune, down to at least low C. When you get into the right hand of the low register, often with larger bore clarinets, you're going to find some sharpness that you cannot do anything about, at least in terms of physically altering the tone holes. So anyway, when you have to make a choice like that, always choose toward a clarinet register. Now, why? Why do I want the clarinet register so perfectly in tune and maybe neglect something about the right-hand low register of the clarinet? The reason is because the clarion register, out of the throat tones and into the clarion register, that's your solo register. That's your register where most of your exposed solos are being played. And that register and throat tones and into the right hand, into the left hand of the low register, you want those notes to be as well in tune as possible and as easily played in tune as possible. So there, when you have to make this choice, which notes do I want perfect? I want to tune the clarinet by whatever means. I want to tune the clarinet so that my clarion register from C to C and my throat tones are as in tune as I can possibly get them, because that's going to serve you more than anything else. The low register notes, it'd be nice not to have them to be sharp. And smaller bore clarinets is the way to go for that. And, a lot of people thought years ago that the large bore clarinets, those clarinets, they switched to smaller bore clarinets in the 1950s and 60s, and that's just a fad. And finally, the large bore clarinets will come back again. They won't. And the reason they won't, at least for classical clarinet players, is because small bore clarinets tuned much better. And right now, tuning is very, very critical. Let me show you something. Years ago, when I was a young guy, believe it or not, I was a young guy. When I was a young guy, in high school, when we checked our tuning on this monster piece of equipment that was about this big, and it sat on a desk, and you could only check one note at a time. And, you'd have to reset it and then check the note and reset it and check the note. And that's what we use for a tuning. I can't remember, it's a Strobicon. Nowadays, we carry around fully chromatic tuners that are adjustable, from 438 to 444 or 420 or whatever we want to do. We carry it in our pocket. Well, it's hard to say about the chicken and egg, but the fact is that tuning ratios and close tuning itself has become much more precise. Players demand, and orchestras demand, and all the organizations demand instruments that play much better in tune than they did, say, 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, for that fact. So we've got these tuners now, and everyone can check their instruments, check the tuning ratios, checks the tuning levels, and we get improved, at least we get improved performance in terms of tuning accuracy. And that's a very positive step, I think, because some of the older orchestral recordings, they get pretty funky in terms of the tuning ratios, especially the woodwind sections. Of course, violins, they always play out of tune anyway. But now, the final thing is, well, what about the third register? Okay, so we talked about the low register, we talked about the middle register, we talked about tuning individual notes, which you will have to test yourself and learn how to test. But what about the third register? The third register is something you don't worry too much about, and this is why. This is my book on clarinet fingerings, and it has over 200 fingerings for the last register of the clarinet. For instance, here Here are the fingerings for high G, right there, and that page, and that page. That's 19 fingerings for high G. The fact is that playing well in tune in the third register, you have a multiplicity of choices. I think there are 24 fingerings for high F sharp. I know there are probably about 16 or 17 for high F. Anyway, with the flexibility and variability of notes up there with the high frequencies and the multiplicity of overtones that we can draw from to create fingerings in the third register, over 200 fingerings for the last octave of the horn, the main thing we need to worry about is getting our first two registers in tune. First, because those first two registers are extremely important, because about 90% of the pitches that you're going to play are going to be in that range. And the third register, you have such a wide choice of really good fingerings that give you improved response, improved tuning, improved color, and so on and so forth. Then you don't really have to worry about the third register all that much on the B-flat clarinet or the A clarinet, because you have this multiplicity of fingerings, plus those notes are very, very flexible in terms of your ability to adjust those tunings behind your nose. So that's sort of the state of the clarinet, and in terms of its tuning and its tunability. They're very small bore clarinets that are made well, that have good tone hole placement, are extremely tunable, so that you can play throughout the clarinet with a great deal of ease. If your playing mechanics are good, if your hearing is good, and you're playing well-balanced reeds, you're going to be able to play the modern clarinet, the modern small bore clarinet, extremely well in tune, unless there's some design flaws in the actual manufacturing. I'm not going to name any names here. But nevertheless, I can assure you, as far as my clarinet production goes, that my clarinets play extremely well in tune. And if you can't play them well in tune, then you need to check what's going on behind your nose, or your reed mouthpiece setup or something like that, because you're doing something you shouldn't be doing in terms of tone production. So that's about it. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. I hope this information, you may need to look at it a few times. I hope this information is going to be helpful to you in making your clarinet more easily played in tune. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.